I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. How does it feel to be a loser? The words hung in the air like a poison cloud. I sat at the head of my dining table, fork frozen halfway to my mouth, as my son-in-law David Kingsley's question silenced the Sunday dinner conversation. His laughter rang hollow across my antique oak table, the same table I had helped my daughter Emily buy when she got married. Everyone's laughing, except me, I thought, taking in the uncomfortable smiles around the table. David swirled his expensive red wine, the bottle I'd brought as a congratulations gift for his promotion, and leaned back in his chair, radiating smug satisfaction. At 42, he'd just been named regional manager at his insurance company, and tonight's dinner was meant to celebrate this achievement. Getting older must be so boring, David continued, his deep voice carrying an edge I'd grown accustomed to over the years. No job to go to, no important things to do, just sitting around all day. I carefully placed my silver fork beside my roast beef, which was now growing cold on the delicate white china plate. As a Japanese-American woman who'd spent 40 years as a dedicated nurse, I'd learned patience. But tonight, something inside me had reached its breaking point. It has good parts and bad parts, I replied evenly, watching him take another swig of my gift wine. David Kingsley hadn't always been this way. When he first married my Emily 12 years ago, he'd been humble, respectful, a promising young insurance agent with big dreams and a polka dot tie. Back then, he'd called me Mrs. Nakamura and spoken of building something worthy of my daughter. Look, don't get me wrong, David said, adjusting his expensive silk tie. You did okay as a nurse back in the day, but that was like, 30 years ago. Everything's different now. It's all about computers and being fast. You need a young brain to really make it big. Emily shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The silver bracelet I'd given her last Christmas caught the candlelight as she glanced between her husband and me. David, Mom had a wonderful job, she said quietly. She helped save people's lives at the hospital. Sure. David waved his hand dismissively. But let's be honest here. When was the last time you actually did something, made something happen, built something real? My grandson Xavier, just 8 years old, looked up from his chicken nuggets. Grandma helped me build an awesome fort in the backyard last month. David patted Xavier's head like he was a puppy. That's sweet, kiddo. But Grandma needs to understand that real grown-ups take care of their families by working hard. Not everyone gets to just relax all day while other people do the heavy lifting. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Emily tried to laugh, but it sounded strained and artificial. Maybe we should talk about something else, she suggested. Zoe, tell Grandma about your art class. But David wasn't finished. The wine in his new position had inflated his ego to dangerous proportions. Actually, I've been thinking about something, he continued, gesturing grandly. Now that I'm making real money, like a lot of money, maybe it's time everyone started pulling their own weight around here. I knew exactly what he meant. For 12 long years, I'd been quietly helping them with everything: house payments, car loans, the children's private school tuition, medical bills, 12 years of silent support while watching David spend money as if it grew on trees. Take Emily, for example, he said, pointing at my daughter. She's been staying home with the kids for so long, living off of, well, let's call it family help. Maybe it's time she got a real job again. Emily's face flushed crimson. She knew, just as I did, that their entire lifestyle was built on my quiet generosity. The children's expensive school uniforms hanging by the door, David's luxury car in the driveway, their magazine-perfect kitchen. None of it would have been possible without my money. Little Zoe, 10 years old with her father's confidence, but her mother's kind eyes, sensed the tension. Are we in trouble, Daddy? No, sweetheart, David reassured her. But it's important to know the difference between people who work hard for their money and people who just gave up trying. He looked directly at me when he said the last part. The insult hung in the air like thick smoke. Emily reached for her wine glass with trembling hands. The children exchanged worried glances, the way they did when thunderstorms grew too loud. David leaned forward, emboldened by my silence. I don't want to be mean here, Linda, but someone needs to ask the hard questions. When was the last time you did something that mattered? When did you last feel proud about earning your own way instead of just existing? He paused, savoring what he thought was his moment of dominance. How does it feel to be such a failure? The question hit me like ice water. Emily gasped. Xavier dropped his fork with a clatter. Zoe's eyes welled with tears, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I took a slow sip of water, placed the glass down with deliberate care, and met David's arrogant gaze. How does it feel? I asked in a calm, clear voice. To know this failure won't be paying your bills anymore. The color drained from David's face. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. The children stared wide-eyed as their father's triumphant smile crumbled. I continued eating my dinner, cutting each piece of meat with precise movements while everyone sat in stunned silence. Outside, twilight settled over the neighborhood, and Mrs. Peterson's terrier barked somewhere in the distance. After what felt like eternity, I wiped my mouth with a cloth napkin, stood up, and kissed Xavier and Zoe goodbye. Thank you for dinner. Emily, it was delicious, I said with the calm dignity my Japanese father had instilled in me decades ago. I walked to the front door, retrieved my coat, and stepped into the cool evening air, leaving behind a table of people who were finally beginning to understand what 12 years of silent support had truly meant. The 20-minute drive home passed in silence, my hands steady on the steering wheel despite the emotional storm brewing inside me. As I pulled into my driveway, the automatic light illuminated my modest front steps. Inside my house, I hung my coat in the hall closet and walked directly to my office. The room smelled of old books and the special beeswax polish I used on my wooden furniture. I switched on my favorite brass lamp, its warm light revealing 12 years of meticulously organized file cabinets. My nursing career had taught me the value of documentation. Every receipt, bank statement, and canceled check had been preserved with professional precision. Time to see exactly what my failure has cost me, I murmured to myself. I opened the first drawer labeled 2012-2015. The folders were color-coded blue for mortgage assistance, green for car loans, yellow for school expenses, red for medical bills. My husband Takeshi had died in late 2011 after a brief but brutal battle with pancreatic cancer. By January 2012, Emily was already struggling financially. I pulled out the first folder and began spreading papers across my large cherry wood desk. The first mortgage assistance check, $200 in February 2012, then another $200 in March, and again in April. The numbers created a pattern across my desk under the lamplight, $200 every month for 144 months. My calculator displayed the total $316,800 just for mortgage assistance. Next came the car payments, David's luxury sedan lease, Emily's family SUV loan, $850 monthly for 10 years, another $102,000. Private school expenses filled an entire drawer by themselves. Xavier's education from preschool through second grade, Zoe's from toddler classes through fourth grade, elite schools with swimming pools and language immersion programs, $18,000 annually, plus additional costs for summer camps and sports activities, 12 years of educational expenses, $288,000. Medical bills when David was between jobs. Dental work for the children. Emergency room visits. Emily's therapy sessions when she battled depression 3 years ago. $6,000 annually for 12 years, $72,000. Vacation receipts hidden behind insurance papers. Disney World in 2018. A European cruise in 2020, ski trips to Colorado, Christmas presents, emergency car repairs, kitchen renovations, another $55,000 in miscellaneous assistance. The final number made me sink back in my leather chair. $833, $800, nearly $1 million. For the first time since Takeshi's funeral, I felt the full weight of the promise I'd made by his hospital bed. "Don't worry about Emily," I had whispered to my dying husband. "I'll make sure she's safe and has everything she needs." I remembered Emily's tears at the funeral, her fear about the mortgage she and David couldn't afford on their own. How grateful she'd been then, calling weekly to thank me, sending homemade cookies, bringing the grandchildren for Sunday visits. When had the thank yous stopped? When had my help transformed from a blessing into an expectation? I pulled out my personal financial records evidence of what I'd sacrificed for them. My depleted savings account. The modest two-bedroom house I'd settled for instead of the lakefront property Takeshi and I had dreamed about. The aging truck in my garage while David drove luxury vehicles. Travel magazines I'd collected but never used because Emily always needed something important. Hobbies I'd abandoned. Friends from church who'd stopped inviting me to dinner because I was always busy helping family. I'd given them almost $1 million and 12 years of my own dreams. At 11 Honduras that night, I reached for my phone and the list of bank contact numbers. Tomorrow would bring necessary conversations with payment services representatives. I closed my eyes, remembering Takeshi's favorite saying, "Dignity costs nothing, but its absence costs everything." Sunday morning dawned bright and clear. My coffee tasted different, stronger somehow. I sat at my kitchen table watching sparrows squabble over breadcrumbs outside my window, then returned to my office where neat stacks of documentation awaited. First National Bank answered after 3 rings. "Account services, this is Jennifer. How can I help you today?" "I need to cancel automatic payments from checking account 784321567889. I said in the same steady voice I'd used throughout my nursing career. "May I have the last 4 digits of your Social Security number to verify your identity?" The entire process took 15 minutes. Jennifer was professional and efficient, having no idea she was dismantling 12 years of financial support with each keystroke. "Those payments have been discontinued. Mrs. Nakamura, is there anything else I can help you with today?" "That's everything. Thank you." I placed a check mark next to mortgage assistance, $200 a month. Colorado Mountain Insurance required a supervisor's approval. The luxury car lease cancellation necessitated conversations with 3 different representatives. Each call followed the same pattern identity verification. Brief computer work. Confirmation numbers carefully recorded in my notebook. By 12:30 in the afternoon, I'd crossed off 10 items from my list. My phone rang at 12:45. "Mom," Emily's voice sounded confused but not yet frightened. "Something strange happened with our house payment. The bank called saying there wasn't enough money in the account. Because you thought I'd keep paying forever." I finished her sentence. Silence stretched between us like an overextended rubber band. "What do you mean?" Her voice rose in pitch, reminiscent of her childhood when caught misbehaving. "Exactly what I said last night. I'm not paying your bills anymore." "But Mom, you can't just the mortgage, the insurance, Xavier's school, everything, Everything stops as of this morning. I could hear her breathing accelerate with panic. This isn't funny. We'll lose our house. Then you'll need to figure out how to pay for it yourselves. The line went quiet with a decisive click. My notebook showed 8 more calls to make. The electric company was surprisingly accommodating. Little Mountain Academy's financial office asked fewer questions than anticipated. Each confirmation number was recorded with nurse-like precision. Emily called back at 1:45, her voice tight with genuine fear. "Mom, please. I don't understand what's happening. The school called. The insurance company called. Even the electric company called. They're all saying our payments were declined because I canceled all the automatic transfers from my accounts." "Your accounts?" The question emerged as a whisper. "Did you think these payments just appeared by magic?" "Emily." Another extended silence. "But we never asked you to pay for everything." "You never asked because you never had to ask. I just did it automatically." "We can't afford." "Sweetie, that's exactly the point." At 1:50, my phone rang again. This time, David's voice came through, attempting to sound authoritative. "Linda, whatever silly game you're playing needs to stop right now." "No game, just reality. You can't destroy our family because your feelings got hurt at dinner." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm just stopping my financial support. You wanted to know how it feels to be a failure. Well, now you can figure out your own bills and find out." His silence lasted even longer than Emily's. The last call on my list was to my financial advisor. "Monday morning, we'll discuss redirecting those monthly payments into my neglected retirement account." Outside, the sparrows had discovered more crumbs to fight over. At 2:30 that afternoon, I heard the distinctive sound of David's luxury sedan pulling into my driveway. Through my living room window, I watched him slam the car door with unnecessary force. Emily emerged from the passenger side, clutching her designer purse like a security blanket. They marched up my front walkway like soldiers preparing for battle. I opened the door before they could knock. "We need to talk," David declared, pushing past me without waiting for an invitation. Emily followed, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "Please come in," I said to their retreating backs, a hint of irony in my voice. David positioned himself in the middle of my living room, radiating entitlement. "This ridiculous tantrum of yours ends right now. You will call those banks immediately and reinstate every payment." "No, I won't." His face reddened alarmingly. "You can't just cut us off without warning. There are legal implications, verbal contracts." "Show me the contract where I agreed to pay your bills until the end of time." Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Mom, please think about what Dad would want. Remember what you promised at his funeral." The mention of Takeshi struck me like a cold wind, but I was prepared for this emotional manipulation. "I promised to help you get stable and secure. 12 years and almost $1 million later, you're less stable than when we started." "1 million?" Emily's whisper was barely audible. I walked to my desk and retrieved my calculator and notebook. $830,800, mortgage assistance, car payments, insurance, education expenses, medical bills, vacations, emergencies. Should I read each category aloud? David's facade of confidence faltered momentarily. "That's impossible. We never asked for that much." "You never asked for anything. You just expected it automatically." Emily sank onto my sofa, her face ashen. "But what about the children? Xavier's baseball team, Zoe's dance classes, those will continue. But I'll pay the schools and activity providers directly. No more money flowing through you and David." "You can't divide the family like that," David snapped angrily. "We're supposed to be a team. Teams require mutual respect." When was the last time either of you expressed gratitude for anything I've done? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Emily's tears began slowly, then intensified into the desperate sobbing I remembered from her adolescent heartbreaks. I didn't know it was so much money. I thought you wanted to help us. I thought it made you happy. It did make me happy, until you stopped being grateful and started demanding it. David paced my carpet like a caged tiger. Fine. You want gratitude. Thank you now, reinstate the payments. Gratitude doesn't work retroactively, David. His pacing ceased abruptly, genuine concern replacing anger for the first time. What exactly do you want from us? I want you to learn how to live within your actual means. I want my grandchildren to see their parents working for what they have instead of expecting handouts. I want to be treated like a mother and grandmother, not a walking ATM. Emily looked up through her tears. What if we can't do it? What if we lose everything? Then you'll discover what failure actually feels like. The silence grew thick enough to slice. David straightened his shoulders, attempting to reclaim his corporate confidence. We'll see about this. There are lawyers who help when elderly people are financially taken advantage of. I smiled at that. Please call them. I'd love to explain how I've been financially exploited for 12 consecutive years. They left without another word. David's luxury car made aggressive noises as he accelerated down my street. I stood at my window watching them disappear around the corner and realized my hands were trembling. Complete silence filled my house. I collapsed into my leather chair, the one Takeshi had given me for our 15th wedding anniversary, and stared at our wedding photo on the mantel. The happy young couple smiling back at me seemed like strangers from another lifetime. That photograph was from 1990. David had worked at a small insurance office then, driven a 12-year-old Honda, and addressed me as Mrs. Nakamura with genuine respect. Mrs. Nakamura, he'd said during our first private conversation, I want you to know I'll take good care of Emily. I might not have much money right now, but I'm working hard to build something worthy of your daughter. His humility had seemed authentic then. I believed every word. 3 years into their marriage, Takeshi was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The disease claimed him in 5 brutal months, leaving Emily heartbroken and David struggling to cover their modest mortgage with his entry-level salary. The 2012 financial crisis had just struck, and his company was conducting mass layoffs. At Takeshi's funeral, Emily had collapsed against me, sobbing. Mom, I don't know how we'll manage. David's job isn't secure. The mortgage is overwhelming. Don't worry, sweetheart, I'd whispered while holding my grieving daughter. I'll help until you're stable and secure. Until you're stable, not forever. Those first years, David's expressions of gratitude had been effusive handwritten thank you cards, weekend visits where he'd repair my fence or mow my lawn. Emily called twice weekly just to check on me, bringing the grandchildren for Sunday dinners at my house. Mom, you're literally saving us, she'd say tearfully. We'll repay you when things improve. The initial mortgage assistance, $200 monthly, was supposed to last 8 months. Just until I get promoted, David had promised. The car loan help, $350 monthly, was meant to be temporary. Just until we build some savings. Xavier's private school tuition, $500 monthly, was supposed to be for kindergarten only, just to give him a strong foundation. Each just until had transformed into permanence. Each temporary arrangement had become an expectation. By 2015, the thank you notes had ceased. David's weekend visits had evolved into occasional appearances where he'd consume my refreshments while complaining about his unreasonable boss. Emily's grateful calls had morphed into monthly requests for additional assistance. Mom, can you cover Zoe's art classes? It's only $150 monthly. Mom, the children need new tablets for school. Mom, our vacation rental was canceled. Can you help us find alternative accommodations? The word please had vanished first, followed by thank you. Finally, even can you had transformed into you need to. By 2020, David had stopped acknowledging my financial support entirely. At neighborhood gatherings, he'd boast about his home improvements, his children's prestigious education, his successful lifestyle. When neighbors complimented his luxury vehicle, he'd smile proudly about his savvy financial planning. Emily had begun defending him instead of me. When I gently suggested they attempt to cover some expenses independently, she'd become irritated. Mom, you don't understand how modern families operate. David experiences enormous pressure at work. The children have established routines. You can't disrupt everything because you're feeling underappreciated. Underappreciated. The word had struck like a physical blow. Last Christmas, neither had mentioned my financial contributions. David had delivered a speech about his hard work supporting the family. Emily had posted social media photos of their expensive gifts with captions about blessed family success. I'd sat in my modest living room examining their early thank you cards from 2012, wondering when gratitude had transformed into entitlement. Now, as darkness descended over my home, I understood what Takeshi would have truly wanted, not endless enabling that fostered dependence, but dignity and respect. Not unlimited generosity, but appreciation that acknowledged sacrifice. Outside, shadows lengthened across my front yard as the distant ringing of a telephone broke the silence. 4 days passed like watching dominoes fall in slow motion. Monday morning brought the first bank notices in the mail. Emily called at 10:15, her voice thin and frightened. Mom, they're saying our mortgage payment failed. There's an $80 penalty fee. The bank requires $285 by Wednesday, or they'll initiate foreclosure proceedings. I remained silent. Mom, are you there? The silence continued until she terminated the call. By lunchtime, David's luxury car lease company had left 3 increasingly urgent voicemails about their missed $750 payment. Emily's family SUV loan, another $420 monthly, had been returned with a $60 penalty. Their homeowner's insurance was canceled at 4:00 p.m. when the automatic payment failed. Tuesday brought deeper troubles. Emily called again, this time with David shouting indistinctly in the background. We can't cover everything, her voice cracked. I've applied at McDonald's, Walmart, and 4 restaurants. Even if I'm hired immediately, they're only offering $11 hourly. That's barely $1,800 monthly before taxes. For the first time in 12 years, she was calculating survival mathematics. Wednesday afternoon, I drove past Little Mountain Academy during dismissal. Xavier and Zoe stood among classmates whose tuition had been paid promptly. The school had contacted Emily that morning, demanding $3,600 immediately, or the children would be disenrolled by Friday. That evening, my neighbor, Mrs. Imani Washington, mentioned hearing raised voices from Emily's house during her evening walk. Sounds like financial troubles, she observed sadly. The husband was shouting something about credit cards being maxed out. Thursday brought the major collapse. Emily's 4th call came at 3:45 p.m. Mom, please. I attended 6 job interviews yesterday: Burger King, a housekeeping service, 2 grocery stores. They all requested references from recent employment. I haven't worked since 2012. Her voice had lost its demanding quality, replaced by something I hadn't heard in years: humility. Michael attempted to pay the mortgage yesterday. Our account contains $2,400. The payment is $2,285. He paid it. then realized we couldn't purchase groceries, cover utilities, or fuel the cars. He had to contact the bank and cancel the payment. I maintained my silence. The car lease company has scheduled someone to repossess David's vehicle on Monday unless we pay $750 plus a $250 reinstatement fee. More silence from me. Mom, her voice became small. I think we're going to lose everything. Yes, I said quietly. You probably will. She began crying, then deep, painful sobs that reminded me of her teenage heartbreaks. But this wasn't adolescent drama. These were adult consequences for adult choices. Friday morning, I reviewed my revised financial plan in my office. The monthly payments I'd been making would now fund the European river cruise Takeshi, and I had planned before his diagnosis. Italian cooking classes, a photography workshop in Ireland. My phone rang at 12:45. David this time, his voice lacking its previous arrogance. Linda, we need to discuss this situation rationally. We've already talked. No, we need a genuine adult conversation about resolving this predicament. You mean how I can fix your mess? An extended pause followed. Yes, he admitted. That's precisely what I mean. At least he was finally being honest. Come over Sunday afternoon, bring everyone, including the children. What should we prepare to discuss? Reality, I said and ended the call. Outside my window, the first spring crocuses were emerging through the soil. Monday morning, my friend Dr. Rohan Mehta from the grocery store called, sounding concerned. Linda, I overheard something troubling yesterday. David was at Counselor Chin's restaurant telling people you've abandoned your family without warning. He claimed you're forcing the children out of private school because you're upset about some trivial matter. I placed my coffee cup down deliberately. What exactly did he tell people? Called it financial abandonment of innocent grandchildren. Used numerous business terms. Made it sound like you're punishing Emily over something insignificant. By Tuesday, Emily had contacted Takeshi's brother, Uncle Hiroshi. He called that afternoon, his voice tight with disapproval. Emily says you've abandoned them during their greatest need. She was crying. Said the children don't understand why Grandma stopped loving them. Did she mention the $833, $800 I've provided over 12 years? A prolonged silence followed. She what? Almost $1 million. Hiroshi. Mortgage payments, car loans, insurance, educational expenses, medical bills, vacations every month for 12 years. That can't possibly be accurate. I have documentation proving every penny. The following morning, Zoe called me. Her small voice sounded rehearsed. Grandma, Mommy says we might lose our house because you don't want to help us anymore. Did we do something wrong? My heart constricted, but I kept my voice gentle. You didn't do anything wrong, sweetie. Would you like me to pick you up for ice cream this afternoon? Mommy says you might refuse everything now. I never say no to ice cream with my favorite granddaughter. That afternoon at Sunny's ice cream parlor, Zoe's manufactured sadness melted away as she enthusiastically described her science project. When I returned her home, Emily watched from the window with calculating eyes. Wednesday brought a more direct confrontation. Linda Murphy, a longtime neighbor, approached me at the post office. Linda Nakamura, I'm ashamed of you, she announced loudly enough for several bystanders to overhear. Cutting off your own daughter when she needs you most. What would Takeshi think? I regarded her calmly. Takeshi would consider 12 years and almost $1 million sufficiently generous. Linda's self-righteous indignation began dissipating. $1,833,800 to be precise. Mortgage assistance, car payments, educational expenses, insurance premiums, medical bills, vacation costs. Would you like to examine my banking records? Other postal patrons had paused to listen. Linda's complexion took on a greenish tinge. Emily never mentioned any of that. Emily reveals very little about what she receives from me, I replied. Only what she wants others to hear. That evening, Dr. Mehta called again. David attempted the same narrative at Counselor Chen's tonight, but Jasper Reynolds was present. Remember him, he sold them that luxury vehicle 4 years ago. What did Jasper say? Asked how David could afford a $55,000 car on his salary. When David began offering excuses, Jasper mentioned remembering you co-signing the lease documents. The entire restaurant became silent very quickly. Thursday morning brought a call from my former hospital colleague, Patricia. Heard some interesting gossip at the coffee shop, but also heard your perspective from Rohan. May I ask you directly, did you really support them continuously for 12 years? Every month since Takeshi died, and they stopped expressing gratitude after the initial few years. Last Christmas, David delivered a speech about his hard work providing for the family. Emily posted photographs of their expensive gifts on social media with hashtags about blessed family success. Patricia made a low whistling sound. That's incredibly cold. Linda, extraordinarily cold. Friday evening, I was watering my front garden when Mrs. Washington came to talk. Mrs. Nakamura. My daughter overheard something at school pickup today, parents discussing family drama. She said some people are questioning the narrative your son-in-law has been spreading around town. I continued watering my roses. People are entitled to their opinions. She also mentioned you've been extremely generous to those children over the years. I love my grandchildren deeply. Of course you do. That has never been questioned by anyone. Saturday morning, Emily called, her voice high-pitched and desperate. People are asking uncomfortable questions, Mom, questions about money and timelines and banking records. You need to stop spreading false information about us. I haven't spread anything. Emily, I've simply answered questions honestly when directly asked. You're destroying our reputation in this community. I'm not destroying anything, sweetheart. I'm just no longer financing false ones. The connection terminated with an abrupt click. Sunday arrived with clear blue skies and the knowledge that by afternoon, we'd all be facing each other in my living room. But this time, the entire community would be watching and listening. The family meeting never materialized. By Monday morning, reality had intervened. Dr. Mehta called at 9:30. Linda, I noticed a foreclosure notice posted on Emily's front door yesterday evening. Official document from the county courthouse. I placed my coffee down carefully on the kitchen table. 30 days. They had 30 days to pay $9, $125, 4 months of missed mortgage payments, plus penalties and legal fees. Tuesday morning brought additional significant changes. David's luxury sedan was absent from their driveway, replaced by an aging gray Honda Civic. Mrs. Washington mentioned seeing David at the Honda dealership, looking completely defeated, while Emily completed paperwork for a substantially less expensive vehicle. The monthly savings must be considerable, she observed quietly. That luxury lease was probably costing them nearly $900 monthly. Wednesday afternoon, I visited the grocery store and discovered Emily behind a checkout counter, wearing a blue vest with a name tag, scanning groceries with mechanical movements. When Mrs. Patterson entered her checkout lane, Emily's face flushed scarlet. Emily, dear, I didn't know you were working here now. Started Monday, Emily responded quietly, avoiding eye contact. Paper or plastic bag? Her shift concluded at 7:00 p.m. I observed through the large window as she walked to the old gray Honda. Her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. That evening, Xavier called me. Grandma, Mom and Dad are fighting again, really loudly this time. What are they arguing about? Buddy? Money stuff. Dad said Mom's job doesn't pay enough to help. Mom said Dad never earned enough either. Then they said mean things about you. What kind of mean things? That you ruined everything on purpose. But then Mom started crying and said maybe they ruined it themselves. Thursday morning brought the sound of heated voices from their house during my morning walk. Through the thin walls, I caught fragments of their argument. 10 hours on my feet for practically nothing. Never appreciated what we had. Your pride got us into this mess. 12 years of free handouts. The arguing ceased suddenly, replaced by a door slamming and David's Honda starting with angry engine noises. That afternoon, Zoe visited me. Her customary cheerfulness had been replaced by profound worry. Grandma, why is everything so different now? I seated her at my kitchen table with chocolate chip cookies and cold milk. What feels different to you, sweetheart? Mom's always tired and sad. Dad gets angry about everything. They talk about losing our house. Xavier heard them say we might have to change schools. How do you feel about all that? Scared, but also? She hesitated, looking down. Also, like maybe they should have said thank you more often. Out of the mouths of babes. Friday evening, I was reading my favorite book in my office when the doorbell rang. David stood on my front porch alone. His usual corporate confidence had completely vanished. His normally crisp shirt was wrinkled, his tie hung loosely, and his face displayed a weariness I'd never witnessed before. Linda, I need to speak with you. Just the two of us, man to woman. I invited him into my living room, the same room where he had demanded I reinstate all payments just 3 weeks earlier. He sat heavily in my armchair, his hands clasped tightly between his knees. The foreclosure is real. 30 days to produce the money. Emily is working 45 hours weekly for $12.50 hourly. After taxes, that's approximately $1,200 monthly. I'm bringing home about $4,200 monthly after taxes. The mortgage payment alone is $2,285. He looked up at me with something resembling humility. We can't make it work. Linda, not even close. We never could we? Without your assistance. No, I said quietly. You never could. I've been reflecting on something you said about earning respect versus expecting it. His voice cracked slightly. I never really earned anything, did I? The house, the cars, the children's prestigious schools. None of it was truly mine through my own efforts. What do you want from me, David? I want to know if there's a way to move forward from this mess, not back to the previous arrangement, but towards something better and more honest. Outside, the streetlights were beginning to illuminate as darkness descended over our quiet neighborhood. Saturday afternoon, I was organizing my financial documents when the doorbell rang again. Emily stood on my front porch in her blue grocery store vest, her face streaked with tears and complete exhaustion. Mom, please, we need to discuss Xavier and Zoe. She looked fundamentally changed, diminished somehow. The entitled confidence I'd watched develop over 12 years had completely disintegrated, revealing the frightened daughter I remembered from Takeshi's funeral. I invited her into my living room. She collapsed into the same chair where David had sat the previous evening. Her hands trembled as she removed her employee name tag. 6 days, she whispered. 6 days until foreclosure proceedings advance. Xavier keeps asking if we're really going to lose our home. Zoe had nightmares last night about moving to an unfamiliar place. What do you want from me, Emily? I want my children to have a stable residence. I want them to complete the school year with their friends. I want Zoe to sleep through the night without crying about leaving her beautiful bedroom. She looked up at me with eyes devoid of manipulation, containing only raw maternal fear. I've been working 45 hours weekly on my feet, scanning groceries for people who used to be my social peers. Yesterday, Mrs. Rodriguez came through my checkout line and asked why I was working there. I wanted to disappear into the floor. But you didn't hide. No, I smiled my brightest smile and asked, paper or plastic? Because I finally understand what work means, what earning means, what you've been trying to teach us all along. She wiped her nose with a tissue from her purse. David told me about your conversation last night. He said you asked if there was a path forward. There might be, I acknowledged, but it would require significant changes from both of you. Tell me what you want. I leaned forward in my chair. I'll pay Xavier and Zoe's tuition directly to Little Mountain Academy. I'll cover their clothing, medical expenses, athletic activities, and music lessons. I'll establish college savings accounts for both of them. Emily's face brightened with the first hope I'd seen in weeks. But, I continued, I won't pay your mortgage, car payments, insurance, or any adult lifestyle expenses. You and David will live within your actual means, period. We can manage that. We'll relocate to a smaller property, find something truly affordable. There's more to my offer. I want public acknowledgement of the 12 years and $833 I've provided. I want sincere public apologies for the disrespect and entitlement. I want genuine gratitude, not just when you need something. Emily's expression crumpled. David will never agree to public apologies. His pride won't allow it. Then his pride is more important than his children's stability and security. We sat in complete silence while she contemplated this reality. What kind of public acknowledgement do you require? A letter to the community news explaining how I've supported your family and thanking me for my generosity. An honest social media post about 12 years of financial assistance. Face-to-face apologies to the people you've misled over the past 3 weeks. And if we do this, all of it, my children will have educational security and their grandmother's love. We'll have a relationship with you based on honesty and mutual respect. But we'll also have a lifestyle limited by what David and I actually earn together. Emily covered her face with her hands as if hiding. I don't know if I can convince him. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, my offer expires permanently. She stood slowly, her grocery vest wrinkled from her long workday. At the front door, she turned back. Mom, thank you for still caring about Xavier and Zoe, even when you're angry with us. I never stopped caring about any of you. Emily, I just stopped enabling your poor choices. After she drove away in the old gray Honda, I sat in my living room watching the evening news on television. Somewhere across town, an extremely difficult conversation was about to commence. Emily's Honda pulled into their driveway at 6:45 p.m. Through Dr. Mehta's subsequent report, I learned exactly how the evening unfolded. David was heating leftover Chinese food when Emily entered the kitchen, still wearing her grocery store vest. He glanced up from the microwave, noticing her red, puffy eyes and exhausted posture. Where have you been? Your shift ended at 4:00. I went to see Mom. The microwave beeped in the silence that followed. David removed the steaming food, placed it on the counter, and turned to fully face his wife. You went behind my back after everything we discussed about handling this together. We're out of time, David. 6 days until foreclosure advances. The children are terrified. I had to try something. Emily sank into a kitchen chair, removing her name tag with trembling fingers. She's willing to help, but there are conditions. What kind of conditions? She'll pay for Xavier and Zoe's school, clothing, activities, medical expenses. She'll establish college savings accounts for both of them. David's expression brightened momentarily. That's excellent. When does she reinstate the mortgage payments? She doesn't. We have to live within our actual means. His momentary happiness evaporated instantly. That's impossible, Emily. You know our expenses exceed our income. She wants something else too. Emily's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Public apologies. Recognition of the 12 years and $833,800 she supported us. David's face paled, then flushed crimson. She wants me to humiliate myself publicly. Admit I've been what a charity case. David, she spent nearly $1 million on us. $1 million. Do you comprehend what that means? It means she chose to help family. That's what mothers do. Emily stood slowly, her grocery vest wrinkled and stained. No, that's what saints do. And we treated her like a walking ATM. From upstairs came Xavier's voice calling down. Mom, Dad, why are you yelling again? Both parents paused, realizing their voices had escalated. Zoe appeared at the top of the stairs in pink pajamas, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Are you fighting about Grandma again? Emily ascended the stairs to comfort her daughter while David paced the kitchen, his hands clenched into fists. When Emily returned 25 minutes later, she found him staring at the foreclosure notice on the counter. I won't do it, he stated without looking up. I won't stand before our neighbors and admit I'm a failure who couldn't provide for his own family. Then what's your solution? Where will we live? Where will the children attend school? We'll determine something, obtain a loan, file bankruptcy, something. Anything except crawling to your mother and begging forgiveness for imaginary transgressions. Emily retrieved her phone and opened the calculator application. All right, let's calculate this together. Our combined monthly income is $5,400. The mortgage payment is $2,285. That leaves $3,115 for everything else. She continued inputting numbers. Car payment for the Honda $280, insurance $220, utilities $250, groceries $500, fuel $180. That's $1,430, leaving us $1,685. See, we can manage adequately. I haven't included the children's expenses. Xavier's baseball league $95 monthly. Zoe's dance classes $75. Both children need school supplies, clothing, medical co-payments, birthday party gifts, Christmas presents. Emily's voice began breaking. David, we cannot afford our children's basic necessities. Through the thin walls, Xavier's voice drifted down again. Mom, Zoe's crying again. She says we're going to be homeless. Emily looked at her husband with eyes devoid of the entitled woman who had demanded her mother restore their payments 3 weeks earlier. We have 18 hours to decide. Mom's offer expires tomorrow at noon. She went upstairs to comfort her children, leaving David alone in the kitchen with a foreclosure notice and a calculator that couldn't make their impossible mathematics work, regardless of how many times he tried. Monday morning at 11:30, the Honda pulled into my driveway carrying all 4 of them. Through my front window, I watched David exit the passenger seat with the defeated posture of a man who'd spent the night staring at the ceiling. Emily knocked on my door with Xavier and Zoe standing beside her in their school uniforms. David remained behind them, his business shirt wrinkled, his eyes red with exhaustion. Mom, we need to accept your offer. All of it, Emily said, her voice quiet but steady. I invited them into my living room. The children sat on my sofa while Emily took the same chair she'd used Saturday. David remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back like a soldier awaiting orders. The bank called this morning, Emily continued. Foreclosure proceedings accelerate at Fort Yaru this afternoon unless we pay $9,125. We don't have it. Zoe tugged at my sleeve. Grandma, are we really going to lose our house? Not if I can help it, sweetheart, I assured her, patting her small hand. David cleared his throat loudly. Linda, I need to say some things. He walked to my fireplace mantel, looking at the wedding photo of Takeshi and me, then turned to face his family. 12 years ago, you offered to help us temporarily, he began, his deep voice lacking its usual confidence. I took that help and transformed it into a permanent arrangement without ever acknowledging what you were sacrificing. His voice cracked slightly. I told people our home improvements came from my success at work. I boasted about the cars, as if I'd earned them. I allowed Xavier and Zoe to believe their grandmother was simply being generous instead of being their actual provider. Emily reached over and took Zoe's small hand in hers. Mom, I owe you apologies too. I treated your generosity like an inheritance, like something I deserved, rather than something you chose to give. You paid our mortgage for 12 years, David added. $316 to $800. You covered our car loans, insurance, educational expenses, medical bills, vacations, Christmas gifts, birthday celebrations, dance classes, baseball leagues. Xavier looked up with surprised eyes. Grandma paid for my baseball. Grandma paid for everything, Emily said quietly. Almost $1 million over 12 years. Zoe's small voice cut through the heavy atmosphere. Why didn't you tell us? Emily's face flushed with shame. Because we were embarrassed, not about Grandma's help, but about how we acted like we didn't need it. I leaned forward in my chair. If I help you retain the house today, things will be completely different. I'll pay Xavier and Zoe's tuition directly to Little Mountain Academy. I'll cover their medical expenses, clothing, activities, and college savings accounts, but I won't pay your mortgage, car payments, or any adult lifestyle expenses. You'll live within your actual means. David nodded slowly, as if his head felt heavy. We understand completely. There's more, I continued. I want public acknowledgement, a letter to the community news thanking me for 12 years of support. Social media posts expressing genuine gratitude, face-to-face apologies to the neighbors you've misled. When do you want this done? David asked, his voice tight. This week, before Saturday. David's jaw tensed, but he nodded again. What else do you require? Monthly family dinners here at my house. Not to monitor your finances, but to maintain proper relationships. To remember that family means respect, not entitlement. I stood and walked to my desk, removing my checkbook. I'll contact First National Bank and arrange an emergency payment, but this is the final mortgage payment I'll ever make for you. After today, you succeed or fail based on your own income. As I picked up the phone to call the bank, I heard Zoe whisper to her mother, Are we going to be okay now? Emily's voice was soft but certain. Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be just fine. For the first time in 12 years, I believed she might actually be right. Tuesday morning, I sat at my kitchen table reading the community news with my second cup of green tea. The foreclosure had been halted. My $9, $125 payment had rescued their house for now. The doorbell rang at 9:15. David stood on my porch, holding a manila envelope. His usual confident posture was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen before, genuine humility. Good morning, Linda. May I come in for a moment? I invited him into my living room. He sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa. I've drafted the letter to the community news, he said, extending the envelope. I wanted you to review it before submission. I removed a single sheet of paper and began reading. To the editor and our community over the past 12 years, my mother-in-law, Linda Nakamura, has provided extraordinary financial support to our family. This support has totaled $833,800, covering our mortgage payments, car loans, children's education, insurance premiums, medical expenses, and various other costs. During this time, I have often presented myself as financially successful, taking credit for a lifestyle that was actually funded by my mother-in-law's generosity. I have failed to publicly acknowledge her contributions or express appropriate gratitude. Recent community rumors about Linda abandoning our family are completely false. In reality, after 12 years of continuous support, Linda has rightfully decided that my wife and I should live within our actual means. She continues to generously support her grandchildren's education and essential needs. I offer my sincere apologies to Linda for my disrespect and entitlement. I also apologize to community members to whom I misrepresented our financial situation. With humble gratitude, David Kingsley. I folded the letter and returned it to the envelope. This is acceptable. David nodded, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Emily will post on social media this afternoon. We've compiled a list of people who require face-to-face apologies. How does it feel? I asked quietly. His eyes met mine briefly before looking away. Humiliating? Exactly as you intended. That wasn't my intention. David, what else would you call forcing me to publicly admit I failed as a provider? I set my teacup down. I'd call it an opportunity for growth. The true price isn't the public acknowledgement, it's confronting the reality that you've been living a lie. A lie you happily funded for 12 years, he countered, a spark of his old defensiveness returning. Yes, I admitted. That was my mistake. I enabled behaviors that weren't healthy for anyone. I'm correcting that now. David stood abruptly. The letter will be published Thursday. Emily's post will appear today. We'll complete the personal apologies by Friday evening. Will that satisfy your requirements? It will satisfy the conditions of our agreement, I replied. Whether it satisfies you internally is something only you can determine. After he left, I sat quietly, remembering how Takeshi had handled similar situations during our marriage. He'd always said, true humility isn't about being humiliated. It's about seeing yourself accurately. I hoped David would eventually understand the difference. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a notification. Emily had tagged me in a social media post. With slight trepidation, I opened the app and began reading. I need to share something important with everyone. For the past 12 years, my mother, Linda Nakamura, has provided extraordinary financial support to our family, $830,800 in total. This has covered our mortgage, cars, private school tuition, and countless other expenses. Despite this incredible generosity, I gradually stopped expressing gratitude and began expecting this support as an entitlement. When Mom recently decided it was time for us to live within our actual means, I reacted poorly and allowed negative rumors to spread about her. The truth is that my mother is continuing to support my children's education and essential needs, while simply asking that my husband and I take responsibility for our adult expenses, something we should have done years ago. Mom, I am deeply sorry for my entitled behavior and lack of appreciation. Thank you for everything you've done for us, and for the valuable lesson you're teaching us now. I'm also sorry to friends who received a different impression from me recently. Mom didn't abandon us. She's finally helping us grow up. With love and genuine gratitude. Emily. The post already had numerous comments, some expressing shock, others offering support, and a few revealing disappointment in Emily and David. I closed the app, feeling a complex mixture of emotions, vindication, sadness, hope, and something else I couldn't quite identify. Wednesday morning brought a call from Dr. Mehta. Linda, have you seen Emily's post? It's generating significant discussion. David was observed at Counselor Chen's restaurant last night, apologizing to several community members. He looked physically ill, but he was doing it. How are people responding? I asked. Mixed reactions. Some admire your generosity. Others are questioning why you supported them for so long. Most are processing their surprise, at the disparity between David's projected image and reality. And how are you feeling about it all? Rohan? He paused before answering. I believe this is necessary medicine, difficult to swallow but ultimately healing. However, I'm concerned about the children. How are they managing? The question had been weighing on me as well. I'm picking them up from school this afternoon. I'll have a better assessment then. At 3:15, I waited outside Little Mountain Academy. When Xavier and Zoe emerged, their expressions revealed everything. Xavier's face was tight with embarrassment. Zoe looked close to tears. Grandma! Zoe ran to me, wrapping her arms around my waist. Kids at school are saying mean things about Daddy. In the car, the full story emerged. Word had spread quickly among the parents, who had inevitably discussed it within earshot of their children. Now Xavier and Zoe were facing playground whispers and direct questions about their father being a fake and their family being charity cases. Is it true? Grandma, Xavier asked, his young voice struggling for composure. Did you really pay for everything? I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. I helped your parents during a difficult time that lasted longer than expected. That doesn't make you a charity case. Xavier, it makes you family. But why did Dad tell everyone he paid for stuff when he didn't? The hurt in his voice was palpable. How could I explain adult pride to an 8-year-old? Sometimes grown-ups get confused about what's important. They think appearing successful matters more than being honest. Is that why Dad looks so sad now? Zoe asked. Because everyone knows the truth. Sometimes the truth hurts at first, I said carefully, but it's still better than living with lies. I took them for ice cream, trying to create a space where they could process their confusion. As we sat at Sunny's ice cream parlor, Zoe licked her chocolate cone thoughtfully. Tommy Klein said we're going to be poor now, she announced suddenly. Being rich or poor isn't just about money. I told her. It's about what you value and how you treat people. But are we going to be poor? Xavier persisted. Practical as always. Your parents will have less money for extra things, I acknowledged. But you'll have what you need, and you'll learn something very valuable about earning what you have. When I dropped them home, Emily was waiting at the door, still in her grocery store uniform. The shadows under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights and difficult days. How are they? She asked quietly as the children ran inside. Confused, embarrassed, but resilient. She nodded, biting her lip. The school called. Some parents are suggesting we should withdraw the children for their own good, as if humiliation by proxy is somehow beneficial. What did you tell them? That my children deserve educational stability, regardless of adult mistakes. Her voice strengthened. That running away from consequences isn't the lesson I want to teach them. I felt an unexpected surge of pride. Perhaps Emily was finding her authentic strength through this ordeal. David's been throwing up, she added suddenly. The public apologies are destroying him. His identity was built around being the successful provider. Now colleagues are avoiding him at work, and there are whispers about his professional judgment. He has a choice, I said. He can either embrace the humility and rebuild on truth, or he can let pride destroy what remains. Emily sighed. He's trying, Mom. He really is. But decades of self-image don't change overnight. As I drove home, I wondered if I had pushed too far with the public acknowledgement requirement. Had I crossed the line from teaching a lesson to exacting revenge? The question troubled me as I prepared for bed that night. Thursday morning, the community news arrived with David's letter prominently featured in the opinion section. By afternoon, my phone was buzzing constantly with calls and messages from friends, acquaintances, and even strangers who had opinions about our family situation. You should have exposed them years ago. How could you let them take advantage for so long? You went too far making them humiliate themselves publicly. What a valuable lesson for the entire community. I stopped answering eventually, needing space to process my own complicated feelings. Had I done the right thing? Was there a kinder path to the same destination that evening? As I watered my garden, Amani Washington appeared at my fence. "Quite the storm you've created, Linda," she observed, her wise eyes studying my face. "Not intentionally," I replied. She leaned against the fence post. "Intent and impact often travel different roads. Those children are catching shrapnel from an adult war." I put down my watering can. What would you have done differently? She considered this. Perhaps nothing. Sometimes lessons require pain to penetrate deeply enough. But remember this: when the storm passes, you'll all need to live together in the landscape it created. Her words stayed with me through the night. Friday afternoon, my doorbell rang. Emily stood there with both children, their faces solemn. "We need to talk," she said. "As a family." In my living room, Xavier and Zoe sat close together on the sofa. Emily took the armchair, while I settled into my favorite reading chair. "David's been admitted to the hospital," Emily said without preamble. "Severe dehydration and exhaustion. The doctor says it's partly physical, partly psychological, a breakdown of sorts." My hand flew to my mouth. "Emily, I never intended—" "I know," she interrupted. "Neither did I. We thought we could just power through the public apologies, pay the price, and move forward." But it was too much for him. Xavier looked up, his young face twisted with worry. "Is Dad going to be okay?" "Yes, sweetheart," Emily assured him. "He just needs rest and help processing everything." "Processing what?" Zoe asked. Emily exchanged a glance with me before answering. "Sometimes when grown-ups discover they've been thinking about things all wrong, it's hard to figure out who they really are." "Identity crisis," I murmured. Emily nodded. "The doctor called it narcissistic injury when David wasn't in the room. Said his self-image was so intertwined with being the successful provider that losing that identity triggered a collapse." I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. Perhaps the public acknowledgement was excessive. "No," Emily said firmly. "The public part wasn't the problem. The truth was, David would have broken down eventually, regardless of who knew. The lie was too big, and he believed it too completely." She reached for her purse and withdrew a folded paper. "He asked me to give you this. He wrote it last night before things got worse." I unfolded the paper with trembling hands. "Linda, I've completed the public apologies as agreed. Each word has been agony, not because it's untrue, but because it's completely true. I've been living a fiction so convincing that I believed it myself. I don't know who I am without the successful image I created. I don't know how to face my children knowing they now understand their father is a fraud. I don't know how to rebuild from such complete humiliation. But I will try, not for the money, which I now realize was never my motivation, but for the dignity that comes from finally living honestly, with genuine remorse." "David," I refolded the letter carefully. "He'll need professional help. He's already speaking with someone at the hospital." Emily confirmed. "But we have another problem. I can't afford to miss work, but I need someone to watch the children. The hospital thinks David will be there at least through the weekend." "They'll stay with me," I said immediately. Xavier and Zoe exchanged glances. "Really?" Zoe asked, perking up slightly. "Of course. We can bake cookies and watch movies and do whatever else seems fun." For the first time that afternoon, Zoe smiled. "Can we have a sleepover in the living room?" "Absolutely." As Emily prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Mom, have we satisfied your conditions with the letter and posts and apologies?" "Yes," I said. "The conditions have been met." Then I have one request. When David comes home, can we pause any further public discussions? Let him heal privately before facing more community reaction. I nodded, remembering Imani's words about living in the post-storm landscape. Of course, the point was never punishment. Emily, it was recognition and change. I understand that now, she said softly. I just wish it hadn't cost so much. After she left, I turned to find Xavier and Zoe watching me with uncertain expressions. Who wants to help me make dinner? I asked, forcing brightness into my voice. Is Dad going to hate you now? Xavier asked suddenly. The directness of children never failed to surprise me. I don't think so. He might be angry for a while, but hate is a very strong word. Dad said you ruined everything, Zoe contributed. But then Mom said you were just trying to fix what we ruined first. I sat between them on the sofa. Sometimes in families, everyone makes mistakes. Your dad and mom made mistakes by expecting too much from me without appreciation. I made mistakes by giving too much without requiring respect. We're all learning now. Is that why you're helping us still? Because you love us even though you're mad. Xavier's perceptiveness was remarkable for his age. Exactly right. Love doesn't disappear during disagreements. It just gets clouded sometimes, like the sun behind storm clouds. Zoe leaned against me. I like that. Storm clouds. That night, as promised, we created a blanket fort in my living room and watched movies until the children fell asleep. Looking at their peaceful faces, I felt both profound love and concern. They were innocent casualties in an adult conflict, navigating emotional complexities beyond their years. I vowed to help them find stability amid the chaos we adults had created. Sunday afternoon, I took Xavier and Zoe to visit David at the hospital. As we walked down the sterile corridor, I could feel Xavier's hand tightening around mine. Will Dad look different? He whispered. He'll look tired. I explained gently. But he's still your dad. David was sitting up in bed when we entered his room. The sight of him shocked me. His usually robust frame appeared diminished, his face gaunt, his eyes shadowed. But when he saw the children, he summoned a smile that reached his eyes. There are my champions, he said, opening his arms. The children rushed to him, their earlier uncertainty forgotten. I hung back, unsure of my place in this reunion. David looked up, meeting my gaze over Zoe's head. Thank you for bringing them, Linda. His voice held no anger, only exhaustion and something that might have been acceptance. How are you feeling? I asked, like I've been running a marathon for 12 years and finally collapsed. He gently disengaged from the children. Could you two check out the vending machine down the hall? I think I saw some chocolate bars that need investigating. After they left, clutching the dollar bills he'd given them, David gestured to the chair beside his bed. I owe you an apology that isn't forced or contractual, he said as I sat down. The public acknowledgments were painful but necessary. They lanced a boil that needed draining. I never intended to cause a breakdown, I said softly. He shook his head. You didn't cause it. You simply removed the financial scaffolding that was holding up a facade. Without it, everything collapsed under its own weight. The doctor says it's a form of identity crisis, I offered. That's a polite term for realizing you're not who you pretended to be. His attempt at a smile failed. Do you know what really broke me? Not the public humiliation. It was Xavier asking me, if Grandma paid for everything, what did you do with all your money? Dad? He looked away, blinking rapidly. I had no answer that wouldn't make me sound selfish and wasteful. Because that's exactly what I was. You're being too hard on yourself, I said, surprising myself with the instinct to comfort him. No, I'm finally being honest. I spent on designer clothes. expensive lunches with colleagues, unnecessary technology, all to maintain an image of success. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law was covering my children's education. The rawness in his voice was painful to hear. The psychiatrist asked me yesterday what I value most in life. He continued, 5 years ago, I would have said professional success, respect from peers, financial achievement. Now I just want my children to look at me without disappointment in their eyes. They don't seem disappointed, I observed. Confused, yes, but still loving. That's the miracle of children. They're willing to forgive so much. He paused. Adults are harder. I understood he was talking about me. I don't need forgiveness, David. I just needed acknowledgement and change. And respect, he added. That's the part I missed for too long. I saw your assistance as my entitlement rather than your choice. The children returned then, pockets bulging with snacks they'd somehow multiplied from David's few dollars. Look what we got, Dad. Xavier emptied a collection of chocolate bars and chips onto the bed. Impressive negotiation skills, David praised, tousling his son's hair. Must get that from your grandmother. She's quite the formidable negotiator. He met my eyes again, and this time there was something new there, a glimmer of genuine respect. The hospital released David on Tuesday with instructions to continue therapy and avoid stress. Emily took the day off to bring him home, while I kept the children at my house. How's he doing really? I asked when she arrived to collect them. Better than expected, worse than hoped, she said, watching the children gather their belongings. The therapy is helping him frame this as an opportunity rather than a catastrophe, but he still has moments of profound shame. And you, how are you managing? Emily's smile was tired but genuine. Surprisingly well. There's something liberating about having everything exposed. No more pretending. No more anxiety about maintaining appearances. The truth often feels that way. I agreed. Scary at first, then freeing. We've decided to put the house on the market, she said. It's too expensive for our actual income. We found a 3-bedroom apartment that would work until we can save for a down payment on something modest. That sounds sensible. The schools are suggesting Xavier and Zoe might benefit from finishing the year remotely, she continued. Too much attention and whispers. I disagree. I think running from difficulty teaches the wrong lesson. I felt another surge of pride in my daughter's emerging strength. What does David think? He's deferring to me on the children's matters right now. Says his judgment has been compromised by ego for too long. She sighed. It's strange in some ways. Our marriage feels more balanced than ever. Without the financial pressure and pretense, we're having real conversations for the first time in years. As she gathered the children to leave, Emily paused. Sunday dinner this weekend at your house. We can't offer much except company, but David suggested we start establishing new traditions based on presence rather than presence. I'd like that very much, I said. After they left, I sat in my suddenly quiet house, reflecting on the rapid changes of the past month. The community reactions had begun to settle. The newspaper had moved on to other stories. Friends had processed their surprise and either offered support or maintained a respectful distance. Imani Washington had been right, the storm was passing, leaving us to navigate the altered landscape it had created. Wednesday morning, I had just finished breakfast when my phone rang. It was Dr. Mehta. Linda, have you seen today's community news? There's a second letter from David. My heart skipped. No, my paper hasn't arrived yet. What does it say? It's different from what you might expect. You should read it yourself. The paper arrived 30 minutes later. I turned immediately to the opinion section and found David's letter to the editor in our community last week. I wrote acknowledging my mother-in-law's extensive financial support and my failure to express appropriate gratitude. That letter was part of an agreement, a condition for continued support of my children's education. Today, I write not from obligation, but from choice. My recent hospitalization has provided valuable perspective. While the public humiliation was initially devastating, it has ultimately proven cleansing. Living honestly, even painfully, is preferable to living falsely in comfort. To those who have expressed shock or judgment, your reactions are understandable. I projected an image of success that was fundamentally misleading. The person most deceived, however, was myself. To my children who may someday read this, I apologize for valuing appearance over authenticity. I am working to become a father worthy of your respect, not through financial provision alone, but through integrity and presence. To Linda Nakamura, beyond our formal agreement, I offer my sincere gratitude, not just for the financial support, but for the difficult gift of accountability. You could have continued enabling our dependency. Instead, you chose the harder path of truth, knowing it might temporarily damage our relationship, but ultimately heal our family. Our journey of rehabilitation has just begun. We are downsizing our home, adjusting our lifestyle to match our actual means, and rebuilding relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. This process is humbling but necessary. As a wise person recently told me, true humility isn't about being humiliated. It's about seeing yourself accurately. I am finally beginning to see. With genuine gratitude, David Kingsley. I read the letter 3 times, my eyes lingering on the quote from Takeshi that I had shared with David. Something had genuinely shifted within him, something beyond mere compliance with our agreement. That afternoon, I received an unexpected text message from Emily. "Have you seen David's letter?" I replied, "Yes, just read it." Her response came quickly. "That was all him. No prompting, no obligation. He's really trying, Mom." Later that evening, Xavier called me on Emily's phone. "Grandma, Dad helped me with my math homework today," he reported excitedly. And he didn't get mad when I didn't understand right away. He just kept explaining different ways until it made sense. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." And he said we're going to start camping on weekends sometimes because it's fun and doesn't cost much money. Have you ever been camping, Grandma? The enthusiasm in his voice warmed my heart. "Not for many years. Your grandfather and I used to camp by Lake Morrison when your mother was young. Dad says we need to find things to do that don't cost a lot but mean a lot. That's our new family motto." After we hung up, I sat in my garden watching the sunset, contemplating this new version of David that was emerging from the crisis. People could surprise you, even after you thought you knew them completely. Friday evening, Dr. Meta and Imani Washington came for tea. As we sat on my patio enjoying the spring evening, the conversation inevitably turned to recent events. "The community gossip is subsiding," Dr. Meta reported. "People have processed their initial shock and moved on to discussing the school board election. Such is the nature of small-town attention spans," Imani observed dryly. "Today's scandal is tomorrow's old news." "How are you feeling about everything?" Linda, Dr. Meta asked. "Any regrets?" I considered the question carefully. "I regret that it required such a drastic intervention. I regret not establishing boundaries years ago, but I don't regret the outcome, despite the painful process. And your relationship with Emily and David, evolving," I said. "More honest than before, though still fragile." Imani nodded approvingly. "Honesty creates better foundations than pleasantry. You can build something real on truth, even difficult truth." "They're coming for dinner on Sunday," I told them. "Their first visit since everything happened that isn't about negotiations or conditions. A new beginning." "Dr. Meta said, raising his teacup in a small toast. To families who find their way back to each other, even through difficult paths. I raised my cup to join his, to difficult paths that lead to better destinations. Saturday morning, I was weeding my garden when a familiar gray Honda pulled into my driveway. David emerged alone and approached somewhat hesitantly. "Good morning, Linda. I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," I said, removing my gardening gloves. "Would you like some tea?" "Actually, I wondered if you could use some help." He gestured to my garden. "I noticed your fence needs minor repairs, and your gutters could use cleaning. It's the least I can do." The offer reminded me of the early years of their marriage, when David would voluntarily help with household tasks during weekend visits, before entitlement had replaced gratitude. "I'd appreciate that," I said. "The toolbox is in the garage." For the next 3 hours, David worked steadily, repairing loose fence boards and clearing debris from gutters. I brought him water and watched surreptitiously from the kitchen window. His movements were purposeful, his expression concentrated. This wasn't an obligation he was fulfilling, it was an offering he was making. When he finished, I invited him inside for lunch, a simple meal of sandwiches and fruit. As we ate, the conversation remained cautious but cordial. "Emily mentioned you're planning to sell the house," I said. He nodded. "We've listed it already, several showings scheduled for next week. Is that difficult for you?" "Less than I expected," he admitted. "The house always felt like borrowed luxury. The apartment we're considering actually feels more honest." "And work. How are colleagues responding?" His expression tightened slightly. "Mixed reactions. Some avoid eye contact. Others have been surprisingly supportive. My direct supervisor took me aside and said he respected my courage in facing reality." "That must have been affirming." "It was unexpected," David acknowledged. "I'd constructed elaborate fears about complete professional rejection. The reality has been more nuanced." As he prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "Thank you for allowing me to help today. For years, I took your assistance without reciprocation. I'd like to change that pattern." "It's appreciated, David, not because I need the help, but because of what it represents." He nodded, understanding. "Emily and the kids are looking forward to dinner tomorrow. Zoe's made you a card. She's been working on it all week." After he left, I returned to my garden, noticing how much neater it looked with the fence repaired. Small acts of service could speak volumes about changing hearts. Sunday arrived with perfect spring weather. I spent the morning preparing a simple but special dinner, nothing extravagant, but thoughtfully created. Fresh flowers adorned the table, family photos, long relegated to storage, reappeared on shelves and walls. They arrived precisely at 4 o'clock. Emily carried a homemade apple pie. David brought a bottle of sparkling cider rather than expensive wine. The children rushed in with handmade gifts, Zoe's elaborate card and Xavier's carefully constructed paper airplane. "It's specially designed for grandmas," he explained seriously. "It flies slower so you can catch it." The afternoon unfolded with a natural ease I hadn't anticipated. We ate in the dining room, using my good china, but without pretense. The conversation flowed from the children's school activities to Emily's work to David's therapy insights. No financial discussions intruded. No veiled references to past conflicts emerged. Just a family rediscovering how to simply be together. After dessert, David suggested a walk around the neighborhood. As we strolled in the golden late afternoon light, Zoe and Xavier ran ahead, investigating interesting rocks and stopping to pet neighborhood dogs. Emily linked her arm through mine, a gesture of affection she hadn't offered in years. "I was so angry at first," she admitted quietly. "I couldn't understand why you would abandon us after all this time." I know, I said. I expected that reaction. Now I see it was the opposite of abandonment, she continued. You were actually refusing to enable us anymore, which is a form of deeper caring. It just didn't feel like caring at the time. Ahead of us, David was showing Xavier how to skip stones across Mrs. Peterson's decorative pond, with her smiling permission. He's different, I observed. Emily nodded. The therapist says his identity was so wrapped up in material success that losing that forced him to find value elsewhere. He's focusing on being present with the kids in ways he never did before. And you, how are you adapting? It's strange, she said thoughtfully. I thought I'd feel deprived without all the extras we had before. Instead, I feel oddly liberated. No more pretending we're something we're not. As the sun began to set, we returned to my house. The children were tired but content. David relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. Emily quietly confident in her new role as co-provider. At the door, David surprised me with a gentle hug. Thank you for dinner, Linda. And for everything else, Emily embraced me next. See you next Sunday. I'll look forward to it, I said, meaning it completely. After they left, I sat in my garden watching the first stars appear. The path had been difficult, even painful at times. The storm had certainly altered our landscape, as Imani had predicted. But in that altered terrain, something authentic was beginning to grow, something that might ultimately be stronger and more beautiful than what had existed before. For the first time since Takeshi's death, I felt true peace about my family's future, not because circumstances were perfect, but because relationships were finally built on truth rather than illusion. And truth, while sometimes painful, was always the best foundation for genuine love. 4 months passed, bringing summer heat and significant changes to all our lives. On the 4th Saturday of July, I sat on my front porch enjoying the morning breeze when a modest SUV pulled into my driveway. The vehicle was at least 10 years old, but freshly washed and well-maintained, a far cry from the luxury sedan David had once driven. Emily emerged first, carrying a homemade fruit salad. David followed with a cooler. The children bounded out, racing toward my porch with the boundless energy of summer vacation. "Grandma," Zoe called, waving a paper in her hand. "I got all A's on my final report card." "So did I," Xavier added, not to be outdone. "Even in math, which was really hard this year." I embraced them both, breathing in the scent of sunshine and children's shampoo. "I'm so proud of you both. Those grades represent real effort and persistence." Emily set the fruit salad on my porch table. They worked incredibly hard, especially after changing schools mid-year. The decision to transfer the children to a less expensive public school had been difficult but necessary. Little Mountain Academy's tuition, even with my direct payments, had become unsustainable amid the constant whispers and social discomfort following the public revelations. "How are they adjusting?" I asked as we moved inside to escape the growing heat. "Better than we expected," David replied, setting down the cooler. Xavier joined the science club, and Zoe's made several close friends already. The changes in David continued to surprise me. His designer clothes had been replaced by simple khakis and button-down shirts. The expensive haircuts and manicured appearance had given way to a more natural look. Most noticeably, the constant undercurrent of stress that had once defined him seemed absent. As the children helped me set the table for lunch, Emily pulled a folder from her bag and set it on the counter. "Our monthly budget review," she said, a habit they'd maintained since our agreement. "We're covering all our essential expenses completely on our own now. The apartment costs half what the mortgage did, and we've eliminated most unnecessary spending." I glanced at the neatly organized spreadsheet. You've even started a savings account. Small but growing, David said, joining us. 10% of each paycheck, no exceptions. The pride in his voice wasn't the artificial bravado of before, but the genuine satisfaction of earned accomplishment. And how's the new position? I asked him, after his hospitalization. David had made the difficult decision to step down from his management role, citing personal reasons. The company had offered him a less prestigious but stable position with regular hours and reduced stress. It's actually better suited to me, he admitted. I'm using my insurance knowledge to help clients directly rather than managing corporate accounts. The pay is less, but so is the pressure. Emily touched his arm affectionately. And he's home for dinner every night now, not constantly traveling or working late. Mom got another promotion, Xavier announced proudly as he placed silverware around the table. She's store manager now, Emily blushed slightly. Assistant manager, but it comes with better hours and benefits. The transformation in my daughter had been equally remarkable, from a dependent housewife to a capable provider in just a few months. She'd discovered strengths she never knew she possessed. After lunch, David surprised me by asking, "Would you like to see our new place? We've been wanting to invite you over, but we wanted to wait until it felt like home." The invitation touched me deeply. I'd love that. Their apartment was in a modest complex about 20 minutes from my house. As we pulled into the parking area, I noticed well-maintained gardens and children playing on a central playground. "It's nothing fancy," Emily said as she unlocked the door. "But it's clean, safe, and the schools are good." The apartment was indeed modest, about half the size of their previous home. The furniture was a mix of pieces from their old house and simple new items. What struck me most, however, was how welcoming it felt. The children eagerly showed me their shared bedroom, where clever organization maximized the limited space. Zoe's artwork decorated the walls, while Xavier's science awards stood proudly on a small bookshelf. "We each get half the closet and 2 drawers," Zoe explained with the seriousness of contract negotiations. "And we alternate who picks the bedtime story." David showed me their small balcony, where container plants created a miniature garden. Not quite the landscaped yard we had before, but we're growing tomatoes and herbs. In the kitchen, Emily pointed out the calendar on the refrigerator. "We plan meals weekly now. No more spontaneous takeout or expensive groceries." What I didn't see was resentment. Despite the significant downsizing, there was a palpable contentment in this space that had been absent in their larger, more luxurious home. "What do you think?" David asked as we completed the tour. "I think you've created something very special here," I said sincerely. "A real home." His smile contained no hint of the embarrassment I'd anticipated. "That's exactly what we were aiming for." As we sat on their small balcony enjoying iced tea, David mentioned casually, "I've been volunteering at a financial literacy program at the community center, teaching basic budgeting to young adults." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely impressed. He nodded. "It's strange, a year ago, I would have considered such work beneath me. Now it feels more meaningful than anything I did in corporate management." "How so?" "I'm sharing hard-earned wisdom," he explained. "These young people are just starting out. If they learn to live within their means now, they might avoid the trap I fell into." Emily added, "We're both focusing on giving back in ways that don't involve money. I'm tutoring English as a second language on Saturdays." As we drove back to my house later that afternoon, I reflected on the remarkable journey we'd all taken. The crisis that had seemed potentially devastating had instead sparked genuine growth and self-discovery. That evening, I called Imani Washington to share my impressions. "They seem happy," I said, still slightly puzzled. "Genuinely happier with less." Amani's warm laugh came through the phone. Of course they are. They're no longer burdened by pretense. Do you know how exhausting it is to maintain an image that doesn't match reality? They're experiencing the freedom of authenticity. I worried I might have been too harsh, I confessed. Harsh, perhaps. Necessary. Absolutely. Her voice softened. Linda, you gave them something far more valuable than money. You gave them the opportunity to discover their true resilience. After we hung up, I sat in my garden watching fireflies emerge in the twilight. Takeshi had always loved fireflies, calling them nature's reminder that light persists even in darkness. The metaphor seemed particularly apt now, from the darkness of confrontation and collapse. New light had indeed emerged. August brought a series of unexpected challenges that tested our newly rebuilt relationships. It began with a phone call from Emily on a Wednesday morning. Her voice was tight with anxiety. "Mom, the school just called. Xavier fell during PE and broke his arm. They're taking him to County General." "I'll meet you there," I said immediately, already reaching for my car keys. At the hospital, I found Emily pacing the emergency room waiting area, her assistant manager name tag still pinned to her blouse. "They're setting it now," she explained, hugging me gratefully. "David's trying to get away from work, but he's in the middle of a client meeting." "Have you called the insurance company?" I asked gently. Emily's face fell. "That's part of the problem. Our new insurance has a $2,500 deductible, and we've only saved about $1,800 so far." The old me would have immediately offered to cover the difference. The new me hesitated, remembering our carefully established boundaries. "What are you thinking?" I asked instead. She squared her shoulders. "We'll figure it out. Maybe a payment plan with the hospital. Her voice broke slightly. "I just wanted you here for moral support, not financial." Pride and love swelled within me. "And that's exactly why I'm here." Xavier emerged an hour later, sporting a bright blue cast and a slightly dazed expression from the pain medication. His first words upon seeing me were, "Grandma, will you sign my cast first?" As I carefully wrote my name with the offered marker, David rushed in, slightly breathless from hurrying. "Sorry I couldn't get here sooner," he said, kissing Emily before kneeling beside Xavier. "How's my tough guy doing?" "The doctor said I was super brave," Xavier reported proudly. "And I get to pick what we have for dinner tonight." "Absolutely," David agreed, examining the cast with appropriate paternal concern, while Xavier showed his father the information sheet about cast care. Emily pulled me aside. "The billing office says the total will be around $3,200, she whispered, "with x-rays, the emergency room fee, and everything else." I waited, saying nothing. "We've arranged a 6-month payment plan," she continued. "It'll be tight, but we can manage it." "Are you sure?" I asked, intentionally leaving the question open-ended. Emily nodded firmly. "This is exactly the kind of situation emergency funds are for. We'll rebuild our savings afterward." As we walked to the parking lot together, David fell into step beside me while Emily helped Xavier into their car. "Yes, this would have played out very differently a year ago," he observed quietly. "How so?" "I would have been angry at the school, the hospital, probably even at Xavier for being careless. I would have complained about the inconvenience and expected you to solve the financial aspect without discussion." His self-awareness impressed me. And now I understand that life includes unexpected challenges. Our responsibility is to handle them maturely, not look for someone to blame or rescue us. He smiled ruefully. "Growth isn't particularly comfortable, but it is satisfying." The second test came 2 weeks later when Emily called on a Saturday afternoon. "Mom, I have a huge favor to ask," she began, her voice uncharacteristically tentative. It's not financial, she added quickly. What do you need, sweetheart? David's mother has invited us to visit her in Florida next month. It would be our first family vacation since everything changed. But Xavier's cast won't be off yet, and I'm worried about managing airport security and everything else with him still limited. You'd like me to help with the children during travel, I guessed. Actually, we can't afford tickets for all of us, she admitted. David and I have been discussing options, and we're wondering if the children could stay with you for the week while we visit his mother. She's been having health issues, and this might be our last chance to see her for a while. The request was reasonable, practical, and demonstrated appropriate adult prioritization, yet it also revealed their continued growth. They weren't canceling important family obligations due to financial limitations, but rather finding creative solutions. I'd be delighted to have them, I said sincerely. Thank you. Emily sighed with relief. We'll pay for any additional food costs while they're with you, she added. And they'll bring their own toiletries and everything. Her attention to these details, ensuring they weren't imposing financially even in small ways, spoke volumes about how far she'd come. The children arrived the following month with backpacks containing carefully packed clothes, favorite books, and activity supplies. Emily had prepared detailed notes about their routines, preferences, and schedule. Xavier needs to keep the cast dry during showers, she explained, handing me a special waterproof cover. And Zoe has been having occasional nightmares, so there's a small nightlight in her bag. After Emily and David departed for their budget flight to Florida, I turned to my grandchildren with a smile. Well, what shall we do first? The week that followed was one of the most joyful I'd experienced in years. Without the tension that had previously shadowed our interactions, we settled into a comfortable rhythm of activities, conversations, and simple pleasures. Xavier taught me to play his favorite board games. Zoe and I baked cookies using my mother's traditional Japanese recipes. We visited the local museum on their free admission day and explored walking trails in the nearby nature preserve. Most precious were the bedtime conversations, when defenses lowered and hearts opened. Grandma, Zoe asked on the third night as I tucked her into the guest bed, are we poor now? The question, asked without self-pity or drama, deserved an honest answer. No, sweetheart, your family has less money than before, but you have everything you truly need. Many people around the world would consider you very fortunate. She considered this thoughtfully. Tommy Klein said we're poor because we live in an apartment now instead of a house. Tommy Klein might not understand the difference between having less and being poor, I suggested. Poor is when you don't have enough for necessities like food and safe housing. Your family has adjusted to living on what your parents actually earn, which is different. Dad says we're rich in ways that matter more than money, she offered. Your dad has become very wise, I said, meaning it completely. The final evening before her parents' return, Zoe asked another question that caught me off guard. Are you rich, Grandma? I considered how to answer appropriately. I have enough for my needs and some extra to help others. But my greatest wealth is in relationships and experiences, not things. Is that why you helped us for so long? Because you had extra? Partly, I acknowledged, but mostly because I love your mother and you children very much. Then why did you stop? The question contained no accusation, only genuine curiosity, because sometimes helping people too much prevents them from discovering their own strength. I explained. Like if I always carried you everywhere, you might never learn how wonderful it feels to walk and run on your own. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with the explanation. I think Mom and Dad are stronger now. They argue less and laugh more. I've noticed that too, I said, smoothing her hair. And Dad says you gave us the best gift ever. What gift was that? The gift of enough. Her voice was already drowsy with approaching sleep. He says most people never learn what enough means, and that makes them sad forever. Long after she fell asleep, I sat in my reading chair contemplating her words, the gift of enough. Perhaps that was indeed what all my difficult actions had ultimately provided, not punishment or revenge, but the profound recognition of sufficiency. Emily and David returned refreshed from their trip, full of stories about reconnecting with David's mother and exploring Florida's free beaches and parks. We had an amazing time, Emily reported as they collected the children's belongings, and we stayed completely within budget. The hotel had a kitchenette, David added, so we cooked most meals ourselves, actually more enjoyable than expensive restaurants. We had picnics on the beach at sunset. As they prepared to leave, David handed me an envelope. "This is for watching the children," he said. I started to refuse, but something in his expression stopped me. Opening the envelope, I found not money but a handwritten card. "Linda, thank you for giving our children your time, wisdom, and love this week. These gifts are more valuable than any financial support could ever be. We are learning, slowly but surely, to distinguish between wants and needs, between appearance and reality. This journey hasn't been easy, but it has been necessary and ultimately liberating." With deepest appreciation, David and Emily beneath their signatures. Zoe had drawn a picture of our cookie baking session, while Xavier had added a carefully written note. "Thanks for helping me with my cast and playing Settlers of Catan 7 times." The simple sincerity of the card moved me far more than any expensive gift could have. "This is perfect," I said, tucking it carefully into my pocket. "Thank you." As I helped carry their bags to the car, David mentioned casually, "We've been invited to participate in a financial management panel at the community center next month. They want us to share our experience of downsizing and adapting to living within our means." "That's wonderful," I said. "Will you do it?" Emily and David exchanged glances. "We're considering it," Emily said. "It would mean being very public about our mistakes and challenges. It might help others avoid similar pitfalls," David added. "That seems worth any discomfort on our part." I was struck by how much their perspective had evolved from hiding financial reality at all costs to considering voluntary transparency for others' benefit. "Whatever you decide, I think it's remarkable that you're even considering it," I told them after they left. I placed their card on my mantle beside Takeshi's photograph. He would have been proud of the family's transformation, not because it validated my approach, but because it demonstrated the resilience and capacity for growth he had always valued. The community center was surprisingly full for a Thursday evening in October. I sat in the back row, having arrived deliberately late to avoid influencing David and Emily's presentation. Dr. Mehta had saved me a seat, while Imani Washington sat directly in front of us. "Quite the turnout," Dr. Mehta whispered as I settled beside him. Word spread quickly once people heard who would be speaking. At the front of the room, Emily and David sat at a table with 3 other panelists, a financial advisor, a family therapist, and a bankruptcy attorney. The moderator, Counselor Chen, was introducing the evening's topic, Financial Honesty Living Within Your Means in an Instagram World. "Our first speakers," Counselor Chen announced, "have a particularly relevant perspective to share." David and Emily Kingsley experienced what many would consider a financial crisis earlier this year, which forced them to completely restructure their relationship with money and status. David leaned toward his microphone. "I'd like to clarify one point," he said with a calm confidence I'd never heard before. "What we experienced wasn't primarily a financial crisis. It was a character crisis that manifested financially." A murmur of interest rippled through the audience. For 12 years, David continued, my wife and I lived a lifestyle that significantly exceeded our actual income. This was possible because my mother-in-law, Linda Nakamura, provided substantial financial support approximately 833,800 over that period. He paused, allowing the number to register with the audience. Several people gasped audibly. We didn't begin with deceptive intentions, Emily added. After my father died, my mother offered to help us temporarily, but temporary assistance gradually became permanent dependency, and gratitude morphed into entitlement. The crisis point came when my disrespect toward my mother-in-law finally triggered a necessary boundary. David explained. She terminated all financial support for our adult expenses, while continuing to assist with our children's education, which was entirely reasonable, Emily emphasized. Though it certainly didn't feel reasonable at the time. For the next 40 minutes, they detailed their journey with remarkable honesty: the initial panic, David's hospitalization, the foreclosure threat, selling their house, adjusting to drastically reduced circumstances, and eventually discovering unexpected benefits in their simpler lifestyle. Our household income decreased by about 60% when we combined my resignation from management with the loss of family support, David explained. Yet our reported happiness levels have actually increased according to the assessments our therapist administers. We've discovered that financial constraints can actually enhance creativity and appreciation, Emily added. Our recent vacation to Florida cost 1/10 of our previous trips, yet provided more genuine family connection and enjoyment. During the question and answer period, someone asked about their relationship with me. David glanced toward the back of the room, somehow sensing my presence despite not knowing I had planned to attend. Our relationship with Linda has been transformed, he said. Previously, it was transactional. She provided money. We provided occasional gratitude that diminished over time. Now it's relational, based on mutual respect, appropriate boundaries, and genuine appreciation. She taught us the difference between being supported and being enabled, Emily added. One promotes growth, the other prevents it. As the session concluded, people surrounded David and Emily, asking questions and sharing their own financial struggles. I remained in my seat, oddly moved by witnessing their story through others' eyes. You should be proud, Imani Washington said, turning to face me. Not everyone has the courage to establish necessary boundaries, especially with family. They did the hard work, I demurred. I just created the circumstances that made it necessary. Sometimes that's exactly what love requires. Dr. Mehta observed, the wisdom to stop protecting people from consequences. As the crowd thinned, David spotted me and made his way to my seat, Emily following close behind. You came, he said, genuine pleasure in his voice. I wouldn't have missed it, I replied. You were both remarkable, honest without being self-pitying, informative without being preachy. It was terrifying, Emily admitted, but also liberating. No more secrets, no more pretense. Are you free for coffee? David asked. The children are at a school event until 9. The four of us, David, Emily, Dr. Mehta, and I, settled at a quiet table in the cafe across from the community center. The conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from community events to the children's activities to plans for the upcoming holidays. We've been thinking about Thanksgiving, Emily said as we finished our coffee. We'd like to host this year. The offer surprised me. In previous years, holiday meals had always been at my house, with Emily contributing minimally and David not at all. In our apartment, I asked, trying to envision how they would accommodate guests in their limited space. It won't be elaborate, David said, and we'll need everyone to bring folding chairs. But we want to contribute what we can, not just receive. We've been planning the budget for weeks, Emily added. Simple food, thoughtfully prepared. We can't offer luxury, but we can offer hospitality. I would be honored, I said sincerely. As we walked to our cars afterward, David hung back slightly to speak with me privately. There's something I've been meaning to ask you, he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Do you think you'll ever fully forgive me for the disrespect, the entitlement, all of it? The question caught me off guard with its directness and vulnerability. I already have, David, I said after a moment's reflection. Forgiveness doesn't mean erasing the past. It means choosing not to let past injuries determine future relationships. He nodded slowly. That makes sense. I'm not sure I've fully forgiven myself yet. That often takes longer, I acknowledged. But from what I've observed, you're not the same person who needed forgiveness. You've changed fundamentally. Because of you, he said. No, I corrected gently. Because of your response to difficult circumstances. Many people face similar challenges and become bitter rather than better. He considered this. Either way, I'm grateful, not just for the financial support all those years, but for the difficult gift of its removal. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the remarkable journey we'd all taken. What had begun as a moment of anger at a Sunday dinner had evolved into a profound transformation for our entire family. The pain had been real, the challenges significant, but the outcome exceeded anything I could have anticipated. Thanksgiving arrived with unseasonably warm weather. I drove to their apartment complex carrying homemade sweet potato pie and a small potted chrysanthemum as a hostess gift, modest offerings that felt appropriate for our new reality. Their apartment had been transformed for the occasion. The small dining table had been extended with a card table, covered by a simple white tablecloth. Handmade decorations created by the children brightened the walls. The air was filled with delicious cooking aromas. Dr. Mehta arrived with his wife, bearing a traditional Indian dish as his contribution. Imani Washington brought fresh bread and fall flowers. David's colleague from work completed our small gathering. As we settled around the makeshift expanded table, David stood to offer a toast. Before we begin, I'd like to express gratitude for everyone here today. This past year has brought significant changes for our family, some painful, all necessary, and ultimately transformative. He raised his glass of sparkling cider. To authentic living, to genuine relationships, and to the wisdom of boundaries. As glasses clinked around the table, I caught Emily's eye. Her smile contained a depth of understanding that spoke volumes about her own growth journey. The meal was indeed simple compared to previous years' elaborate spreads, yet somehow more satisfying. Conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by laughter and thoughtful exchanges. The children proudly helped serve dishes they had helped prepare. After dessert, Zoe tugged at my sleeve. "Grandma, will you come see something?" She led me to the children's bedroom, where Xavier was waiting with a large poster board propped against the wall. "We made this for school," he explained. "The assignment was, what I'm thankful for." The poster was divided into sections with photographs and handwritten notes. In the center was a recent picture of all of us: David, Emily, the children, and me taken during a weekend visit to the park. Around this central image were smaller photos: Xavier playing baseball in his new public school uniform, Zoe with her art class, Emily in her assistant manager vest, David volunteering at the community center, me teaching Zoe to make origami cranes. Beneath each photo, the children had written simple statements. "I'm thankful for a dad who plays games with me instead of working late. I'm thankful for a mom who is strong and helps others. I'm thankful for a grandma who teaches us about what really matters. I'm thankful we have enough." That last line, "I'm thankful we have enough," brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Do you like it? Zoe asked anxiously, noticing my emotion. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, I told her honestly. Later that evening, as everyone helped with cleanup, Emily joined me on their small balcony. The autumn sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and golds. A year ago, I would have been embarrassed to host Thanksgiving in this apartment, she admitted. I would have seen it as a failure rather than an accomplishment. And now, I prompted, now I understand that the ability to create a warm, loving environment within our actual means is something to be proud of, not ashamed of. She leaned against the railing. I used to think happiness came from having more. Now I realize it comes from appreciating what is. As I prepared to leave, David pressed a small envelope into my hand. Please don't open this until you get home, he requested. Curious, I waited until I was settled in my favorite chair before carefully opening the envelope. Inside was a simple card and a check. The check was for $1,200, a modest sum compared to what I had once provided them, but significant given their current circumstances. In the memo line, David had written, "First repayment." The accompanying note explained, Linda, "This represents the beginning of our commitment to gradually repay your generosity. We know we can never return the full amount, but we want to acknowledge our responsibility and demonstrate our changed perspective with action, not just words. We've established a dedicated repayment fund with 5% of our monthly income. It's not much, but it's a start. More importantly, it's a constant reminder of both your generosity and our previous entitlement. Our goal isn't to erase the past, but to honor it by building a different future. With love and genuine gratitude, Emily and David." I sat holding the check for a long time, not because of its monetary value, but because of what it represented: the completion of a full circle journey from entitlement to gratitude, from dependency to responsibility. The next morning, I drove to the bank and deposited the check into a newly created account. The teller asked what name I wanted on the account. After a moment's thought, I replied, "The Takeshi Nakamura Legacy Fund." When she asked what the fund was for, I smiled. Educational opportunities for my grandchildren and a cruise through the Mediterranean that my husband and I always dreamed about. As I left the bank, the November sunshine felt particularly warm. I had set out to teach my family about financial boundaries and respect. In the process, we had all learned something far more valuable: that true wealth exists not in bank accounts or possessions, but in relationships built on honesty, mutual respect, and appropriate boundaries. The journey hadn't been easy. The confrontations had been painful, the adjustments difficult. But standing on the other side of it all, I felt a deep certainty that Takeshi would have approved. "The price of entitlement is high," he would have said in his practical way, "but the rewards of authenticity are priceless." Walking through the park near my house, I noticed an elderly couple sitting on a bench, holding hands and feeding birds. They radiated a contentment that needed no external validation or material display. Someday, I thought, perhaps David and Emily would achieve that same quiet confidence, the certainty that comes from building a life aligned with one's actual values rather than projected image. For now, though, they were on the right path. And sometimes, the journey itself is the greatest gift of all. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and don't forget to check out 2 other stories that are channel favorites. I'm Linda Nakamura, and I'm grateful you took the time to follow my story. Andienitao.